Hello, I'm Sidney Porter from the Health Physics Society History Committee, and it's my distinct pleasure today to interview and videotape Professor Kenneth L. Miller, who is an elected fellow of the Health Physics Society, a board-certified health physicist, and also certified by the American Board of Medical Physics. Ken has been an incredible contributor to our society, to the Health Physics Society, over a lifetime of professional work. And it's my job today to talk to Ken and to have him tell us all about how the health physics became a part of his life and how the profession has evolved over the years. And I also hope to be able to point out the many, many contributions. There are so many that in this limited time that we have together, I'm not going to be able to hit them all, but I certainly hope Ken to be able to hit the high points. And why don't you start by telling us in high school what brought you into the science field and who was important in your life then?
Well, absolutely. I was in high school during the 50s, and I can remember very clearly the day that it was announced that Sputnik was in orbit. And so that caused a real focus on the sciences and what we were doing wrong and what they were doing right and this sort of thing, and what we were going to have to do to overcome and this sort of thing. And there was immediate talk of having Saturday classes and having school open 12 months a year and all this sort of thing, because it created a great stir. And this was right in the midst of a very exciting time for science, you know, with coming out of the Eisenhower presidency and the startup of the Shippingport nuclear reactor and all the wonderful things that were going on in science. I mean, it was the Westinghouse world in those days and this sort of thing. And so science certainly was a favored subject in those days, and it was certainly one that held great promise for wonderful things to come in the future. And so it was one of those subject areas that I seemed to have some aptitude for, and I slipped into it very, very easily. I thoroughly enjoyed science the whole way through high school. I enjoyed mathematics. And I did extremely well in those subjects and that sort of thing.
Who was most influential in high school as far as you were concerned?
Well, I was very fortunate in going through high school to have excellent teachers in virtually every subject that I took. But
where did you go to high school?
If I had to point to one who probably had a real impact on my life, it was my high school physics teacher, a man by the name of Bill Eisman. As far as I know, he could still be teaching, and hopefully he will be, because he was one of those individuals who really made it very interesting, very much fun, very challenging, and very rewarding. And so he probably had a great influence on my life, because when I got to college and started thinking, what am I going to major in, the first thing that came to mind was physics, and the second thing was mathematics. So I ended up going through college. I attended Lock Haven, it was State College at that time. It's Lock Haven University now.
Located where?
In Lock Haven, Pennsylvania, which is about 35, 40 miles due east of Penn State University, located near State College, Pennsylvania. And it's not a big football school, but has a national influence as a wrestling school, and it's predominantly a teacher's college. And I predominantly or primarily went there because I had an interest in teaching. And so I graduated from Lock Haven University in 1965 with a degree in education and a triple major in physics, math, and general science. And I immediately went to work as a high school math and physics teacher.
Whereabouts?
In a little town called Port Allegany, Pennsylvania, which is in the north central part of Pennsylvania, very close to the New York borderline.
What grades were you teaching?
I was teaching grade 8 through 12. in a variety of different maths and physics. One year I taught, or the one summer I taught chemistry and biology as well. And I was qualified to do that because I ended up with enough credits in the sciences and so on to have a physics, math, and general science major. And so the general science really gave me the ability to teach any of those subjects.
And how about your love for teaching? What's happened between now and then?
Well, I've never lost it. You know, it's still there. And I would probably still be there, maybe even in Port Allegany teaching, had I been able to earn a living at the time and support a family.
When were you married, by the way?
I was married right after I graduated from high school. I married my high school sweetheart. And
how many children have you, by the way?
we have 2 and 2 grandchildren. And this coming June, we will celebrate our 40th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
So it's one of those, the odds were probably against it because we're both so young, but it's one of those that also worked out very well because we matured in a hurry and we grew together, and we've been together for a long time. So it's worked out very well. We're back at the high school,
Yeah.
and yeah, you got to realize at the time when I started teaching high school, the average teacher salary was $4,300 a year. And because I had the physics capabilities, I commanded a much higher salary. So I started teaching at $5,000 a year. And it really wasn't an adequate income to support a family. I found myself working at a local gas station on weekends, pumping gas and you know, tuning up automobiles just to make enough extra to make ends meet and that sort of thing. So, but I really enjoyed teaching. I really loved teaching, and I had intentions of staying in teaching, but the problem that I faced was that if you're going to receive permanent certification to teach in Pennsylvania,
Yeah.
you need 24 credits beyond the baccalaureate degree. And with my raising a family and working odd jobs to supplement the income and this sort of thing, I really didn't have time to go get the credits that I needed. And certainly I didn't have enough money to pay for the tuition for the courses and this sort of thing. So after a year and a half of teaching, I decided that I was fast approaching the time when they would have to ask me to leave because I didn't have the credits that I needed. So I decided in my situation, the only thing that I could really do was find a job that would allow me to both work and go to school at the same time. And so that was my introduction to health physics. The job that I found was at Penn State University.
Who helped you find this job, by the way?
You know, it was funny. I walked into the Human Resources office one day. I said, you know, I'd like to fill out an application. I'm looking for a job. I filled out
Penn State?
At Penn State University. I filled out the application. I handed in. The gal said, "Would you wait a few minutes?" She looked over my application. She came back. She said, "I see you have a background in physics." And I said, "Yes." She says, "Do you have any fear of radiation?" I said, "No." She said, "We have a position open that you certainly qualify for. You might want to go take a look at it." And it turns out that the position that they had open was for a health physics tech in the health physics program at Penn State University, working under Roger Granlund. So,
and he was well known, well established at that point in time.
Absolutely. Roger was very well established at that time, and we hit it off. I accepted the position. And it, in fact, did do everything that I had hoped it would. Gave me a chance to earn a better income than what I could make teaching. But it also, with the university policy, allowed me to take time from the job to go take courses. So over the next 3 years, I accumulated certainly more than the 24 credits that I needed to return to teaching. But in the meantime, I found that I had also fallen in love with health physics, and I found that it satisfied my need for teaching, because when you're in health physics, half of your job is teaching. I mean, you're always teaching and always running training programs and that sort of thing. But it also incorporated other unique and interesting challenges with the science involved and application of the science, and doing evaluations and doing calculations, and working with people and consulting with people and sitting down with researchers and helping them to figure out what's the best way to introduce radioactive materials into an experimental setup that might give them the answers that they hope to receive, and all that sort of thing. So I found that working in that university environment put me in touch with an exciting group of people who were on the very cutting edge of technology. They were the movers and shakers, and they were the way of the future, and working with them gave you an opportunity to see it long before these things were made known to the public. So it was a very exciting environment to be in, and so I decided for a short time there, I thought that computer science, computer engineering, computer programming was going to be the way of the future. So I started taking some graduate courses in computer programming, and after 2, I decided to quit, not because I'd changed my mind about the future of that, but because I found I had absolutely no aptitude for key punching, and that was the way that you did the programming in those days. So after 3 years, or during my 3rd year at Penn State, I began to think very seriously about health physics as a career. And I started checking around at graduate programs, and the University of Pittsburgh offered me a public health service fellowship to do my master's degree at the University of Pittsburgh. So I accepted that, took a leave of absence from Penn State University, and moved to Pittsburgh. The Pittsburgh program was just an ideal match for me, and I felt.
How so?
Well, I felt that I was extremely fortunate, having had experience in health physics, because when I got to graduate school, I knew what I didn't know. I knew what I needed to know, and I knew what I was going to have mastered if I was going to be effective after I completed the program. So I think that having that kind of insight made me a far better student, maybe not a better student, but it allowed me to graduate from that program much more focused, knowing why I was studying the things that I was studying, and knowing how they were going to be applied in the real world.
It was wonderful that you had that earlier 3-year experience.
Oh, absolutely. It was super.
Who were the people that most influenced you at Pitt?
Well, you know, certainly Neil Wald was the chair of the department there.
Well, Dr. Neil Wald is ex-president of the Health Physics Society and one of its early leaders.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And who else at Pitt?
Joe Watson was there. Ernie Sternglass was there. Jack Schubert was there. But the one person who was there, who probably had absolutely the biggest impact on my professional career, was Alan Brodsky.
You want to tell us why he's such an incredible person?
Well, Alan is the ideal health physicist. He absolutely loves the field, and he conveys this love for the field, for the science, for the interaction, for the regulatory processes, the whole bit. He conveys all of this in his teaching. So he's a very exciting teacher of health physics, and he's a fantastic motivator. He's the kind who can do an animated hour lecture on neutrons colliding and this sort of thing, and have you walk out of there just chomping at the bits to get to a calculator and start punching in numbers and this sort of thing to come to the next phase of this interaction, that sort of thing. So he was just both a great teacher and a great friend, and he's been just a very good personal friend of mine ever since I was at Pitt.
And he's still a gifted teacher and still teaches.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And it just has amazed me over the years to listen to acceptances for various awards and so on within the society, and to see how many of the awardees point to Alan Brodsky as one of those people who played a significant role in their professional lives.
And I might add that there are a lot of people that have you to thank for their professionalism in health physics too.
Well, it's very kind of you to say so. I certainly don't put myself in the class of the Alan Brodskys and so on, but I've enjoyed health physics. I've had a fun time in health physics. You know, it's been an interesting and a rewarding career for me.
Well, I put you in that class. You have given so much, especially with your work with the journal, to all health physicists. And I hate to think of the thousands of hours that you've put in. I guess I'm jumping ahead now, but the work that you've done with the journal has affected and continues to affect so many people. And it's something that is just unbelievable. Can you tell me a little bit about what happened to you after your MS that you got under Alan Brodsky and Neil Wald?
Absolutely. I completed my master's degree in 1 year, which meant it was a very, very intense year. I accumulated 64 graduate credits in that 1 year.
It's unbelievable.
That included research and a thesis defense. So, but again, that's always been my mode of operation, this sort of thing. Education's always come easy, and it's always been a uniquely challenging and rewarding aspect of my life. But as soon as I graduated from the University of Pittsburgh, I went back to Penn State University and took the position as associate health physicist to Roger Granlund. And my stay there this time was quite short. It only lasted 12 months because in the interim they were opening up research labs at the new medical school and medical college of Penn State University, the Milton S. Hershey Medical Center, that is located 90 miles away in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And it was during that 12 months that I was back at Penn State University that the Hershey Medical Center decided that it was not a good situation to have their programs monitored remotely from 90 miles away. And they decided that the best way that they could assure that things were done absolutely the right way at Hershey, and the best way that they could come up with of controlling their own future research destiny was to establish their own licenses and their own radiation safety program on site. And so it was during the 12 months that I was back at Penn State University that they decided to do this and to establish a health physics program at Hershey. I was extremely fortunate. I think I was one of about 75 applicants for the job. And so I was very fortunate to have been named director of the Division of Health Physics at the Hershey Medical Center. And it was a unique opportunity that doesn't come along very often to those in this profession. When you consider the fact moving into a completely new facility and having the ability to start from scratch and develop the radiation safety program and to develop the training programs and to get to know all of the users and to get familiar with them and train them. And
did you have an academic appointment also?
Yes, I started there and I had an academic appointment as a research associate. I was director of health physics and research associate. So I was quite pleased with that, and it was For somebody who did not have the PhD, it was a very gratifying thing to be recognized in that fashion.
And you probably beat out a lot of PhDs for the job, I would imagine, too. You know,
yeah, I didn't see the applications, but I was told that a good 1/3 of all the applicants had PhDs at that time.
Now, what was your biggest challenge in starting this program?
The biggest challenge was in the very beginning, things were very busy because I arrived at Hershey just when they were about to open a hospital and start receiving patients. And I arrived at a time to find that we desperately needed a radiation safety program, and so I was very busy writing radiation safety manuals and developing various procedures and this sort of thing.
You had to get the licenses, right?
Setting up programs, writing license applications, all that sort of thing. And I must confess, I was a bit busy too, learning what all the medical uses were going to be that I was asking for license approval for.
And so, at the same time, you were starting, starting a whole new license program, starting a whole new training program, starting a whole new health physics program. That's an incredible amount of work. How old were you then?
28.
That's an incredible amount of responsibility for a 28-year-old. Now, who are the people that you got to help you with this program?
Well, I really didn't get anybody to help me with the program. When I first came to Hershey, I was the only person in health physics. I was allowed to create a position for one technician shortly after I got there. So that certainly helped with the routine things with the radioisotope labs, receipt and checking in of packages of radioactive materials and delivering them to the labs, and contamination surveys within the labs and radioactive waste disposal and all that sort of applied stuff that freed me up to concentrate on the licenses and the written programs and all that sort of thing. And being in that kind of a setting, you immediately get pulled in also to a lot of teaching. We have medical students and we have graduate students, and we have graduate programs in laboratory animal science and all this sort of thing. And all of these areas, in one way, shape, or another, work with various radiation sources. So it was decided right from the beginning, we need to get these people in some instruction on how to safely handle and use these sources of radiation. So I immediately got pulled into giving talks and lectures and that sort of thing as well.
Now, something happened a little later on, about 1972, that would affect you greatly later. Weren't you approached by Metropolitan Edison to set up a unique program? Yeah,
I sure was, and it was about 1972 when I received a phone call from the head of health physics at the 3 Mile Island asking if I would develop a medical radiation emergency plan for 3 Mile Island so that the Hershey Medical Center would be able to accept and provide care and treatment for any contaminated or exposed radiation accident victims from the plant. So, I was very pleased to do that, and again, timing was kind of fortuitous because it was about a year before they started receiving their first shipments of nuclear fuel to fuel the reactor core there. So I developed that medical radiation emergency plan, and it was accepted and agreed upon, and Metropolitan Edison and the Hershey Medical Center signed a contract guaranteeing that the Hershey Medical Center would accept any radiation accident victims from the plant. And here we are almost 30 years later, and the contract is still in effect.
Some things work.
It's worked, and it's worked well.
Now, you worked on your boards a few years later and passed your health physics boards, as I remember, which was certainly a milestone.
Right. 1976 is when I took the health physics certification exam and passed it, and certainly that was one of the milestones of my career, and certainly it was one of the very nice things to have accomplished and put behind you and this sort of thing. It also gave me, to be honest, a chance later on to serve on the American Board of Health Physics. So I did serve on the board, and I did serve as secretary of that board later on. So I got to do some payback as well.
Which was a lot of work, by the way.
Oh, it's a tremendous amount of work, and you know, you've got to give anybody who serves on that board a lot of credit, because it certainly does involve a lot of work.
Now, in 1982, you were given what I consider to be the most prestigious award that the Health Physics Society gives, and that's the Elda Anderson Award. You want to tell me a little bit about what that meant to you to receive that?
Well, it was probably outside of seeing my two sons being born, it was probably the greatest experience of my life. And I was very, very pleased and very proud to receive that award, and receive it in the spirit of knowing what expectations come with that award. And clearly, people who are singled out to receive that award are sort of tapped as those who are expected to contribute to the society from that point on. And so I think that if you look at the society and a lot of the contributors to the society, a lot of them are Elda Anderson Award winners. And not only did it do that for me, but it really put me in very close touch with a unique group of individuals, that being the other Elda Anderson awardees. And that is a very close-knit group. The Elda Anderson group that still meets at each annual meeting and decides how best we can serve the society as a whole and this sort of thing. I think they're very supportive of each other and so on. So it's become a very nice the Council of Elda Anderson, and so I have just thoroughly enjoyed the relationship with that group of individuals over the years.
You've accomplished so much for the society. I think maybe what we ought to do is go back chronologically. We talked about the fact that you were associated with Metropolitan Edison, which is the owner of 3 Mile Island, in 1972.
Yes.
And on March 28th, 1979 is a date that neither of us will ever forget.
You remember it well, 4:06 a.m. Huh?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I was called up early that morning, being a dosimetrist, to do effluent assessment, and you and I talked many times after that. You want to tell me a little bit about the terribly difficult first few days, because you contributed greatly to the effort.
The difficulty for me during the first couple of days after that accident was that it made life so unbelievably hectic. There were just so many things going on, and for the very first time, the institution that I was at, the Hershey Medical Center, was faced with the possibility of having to evacuate a hospital. I don't think this has ever been done before. And there was some great concern as to how this would be handled and what we would do and this sort of thing. But not only that, there was a tremendous amount of things going on in the area and this sort of thing. Great deals of concern on the part of people, the public living in that area, great deal of concern on the part of the employees at the Hershey Medical Center, and all that sort of thing. But probably the most unique thing about all that was the number of members of the news media that converged on that region. And so that very quickly, because the people at TMI were so busy with the plant and what was going on and trying to get things under control, members of the news media were looking for anybody who could speak authoritatively in terms of radiation. And when word got out that Ken Miller was at the Hershey Medical Center, and the Hershey Medical Center had a tie-in with 3 Mile Island, we became the focus of a lot of media attention.
But you were also called by hundreds upon hundreds of citizens. Tell me about that.
Well, during the first 3 days of that accident, I logged in over 700 phone calls, and we certainly had a lot of concerned people in the area and this sort of thing. And I certainly personally could not handle all the phone calls and that sort of thing, so we quickly began looking for ways of doing this sort of thing, and we brought all of our radiology residents in to hurry-up training sessions and this sort of thing, explained the situation very fully to them, went over with them the types of questions that members of the public were asking, what were the appropriate answers to these questions, and so on. So we set up a around-the-clock hotline at the Hershey Medical Center that was...
And I bet it was called around the clock, too.
Oh, it was. Yeah, we logged in a lot of calls, but there were other concerns, too, in the area.
What did you do about the great concern of iodine 131?
Yeah,
even so the plant knew very small amounts were being released. The public didn't know that and didn't believe it if they were told it.
Yeah, and it was the sort of thing, you couldn't tell them, you had to show them. And so we, the only capabilities we had at the time for doing thyroid uptake counting was, of course, the thyroid uptake counter in our own nuclear medicine department. But we issued public bulletins stating that anybody who wanted to could come to the Hershey Medical Center.
And how soon after the accident started did you do
that? This was several days after the accident, probably within the first 5 or 6 days following the accident that we put out this bulletin. And we had a lot of people come. We had, as I recall, 114, 120, somewhere in that range.
So you must have relieved a huge amount of anxiety doing that.
Oh, yeah, and it was kind of interesting because you know, a lot of the people who came were Amish families or Mennonite families, and we remarked on this at the time because, you know, they would come with their, and they all have 4 or 5 little kids, and so they were concerned. But the kids were perfectly behaved. They would come into nuclear medicine, they would all sit side by side on the sofa, they would sit there quietly, and they would wait for the procedure and this sort of thing. And so it was an interesting and unusual time.
I guess, you know, the Amish in general did not want to evacuate and leave their animals.
That is correct.
And therefore, they were kind of stuck there because their way of life was taking care of their animals.
Absolutely.
And so they must have been very concerned, and this was their only way to have that concern relieved, from what I could see.
That's correct. That is correct. So I would say that at least half of the people who came in to have their thyroids counted were from those Amish farm communities.
So what other things did you do concerning TMI? Because there were many concerns. So it wasn't just iodine.
Well,
in fact, I remember calling you because we were finding small amounts of iodine 131 in the river, and being in charge of effluent assessment, I knew that TMI wasn't putting it in there.
Sure.
But the world wasn't going to believe that we weren't putting it in there.
Sure.
And so I had no choice but to call the nuclear medicine facilities and say, do you have patients that are urinating iodine into the sanitary sewer? And it turns out everybody I called said yes. And you were the first people we called because Swatara Creek dumps into the river just above TMI.
Sure.
And what was your response to that call?
Well, my response was very likely that any iodine that you're seeing is patient-related. There were levels of radioiodine that could be administered to patients for treatment of hyperthyroidism, Graves' disease, that sort of thing at the time, and these patients could be treated as outpatients and sent home, as long as the activity administered was below 30 millicuries.
Yeah, right, sure.
And also we were well established in treating thyroid cancer with much higher doses, 100 to 200 millicuries at a time. And again, once the patient dropped below 30 millicuries, they could be discharged to go home. Now, most hospitals simply get rid of the urine from these patients by dumping it down the commode. Hershey Medical Center, I established a program, so we will collect the urine from these patients. And we did this for two reasons, because we're very sensitive to the fact that our sewage treatment plant did empty into the Swatara Creek that you mentioned. I was very sensitive to the fact that that creek is used for recreational purposes. So I didn't want any unnecessary iodine from our facility going into Swatara Creek. The other thing was, we found it very easy to measure the amount of radioactivity in the urine on a daily basis, so we could give the physicians in charge of treating these patients a much better indication of the excretion rate of the iodine that we were giving to the patient. And it gave us a better comfort level.
But you did, in fact, hold up putting the urine into the sanitary sewer, right? Your bottom line was that you held up putting that radioactive urine into the sanitary sewer.
The bulk of it, absolutely.
And that made a big difference, because you know, we were seeing this all the way out to the Chesapeake Bay.
Sure.
And the world was monitoring it. There were like 15 downstream water users, including the city of Baltimore, that were panicked about this. Well, and when they saw low levels of radioiodine, people were wondering, should we stop drinking water in Baltimore City? It had a huge effect that rippled way out.
Yeah, and the worst part was it was very difficult to explain it to these people that it really didn't, yes, it was being detected, but no, it didn't represent any harm, any public health threat or what have you. And I can't take claim for that radioactive iodine, because there are a number of large hospitals above us on the Susquehanna River that does that kind of treatment. And
there was York. I talked to Joe Burkle at York and got him to do the same thing, by the way. But the thing is, you were the first to say, well, we can do something about it. And I don't think the public realizes how much they owe you, because what this does is this gets rid of the iodine, and therefore the problem goes away, because it's no longer a concern if there's no iodine there. And so this is just one of the many things that you were doing in order to alleviate the incredible amount of concern that was there.
Well, back in the late 70s, I had written and published our program for handling these patients, and I think that program was used as a guide by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to develop their Part 35 regulations on dealing with iodine treatment patients.
So in the years to come after TMI, you changed roles in your response to the accident. First of all, in the first year or so, there was all this concern from the citizens and the whole body counting, which was so very important. It was vitally important, that whole body counting. And I might add, it helped greatly in years to come to have that information to prove that there was no significant iodine in people, because the lawsuits were absolutely horrendous, multi-billion-dollar lawsuits. And the data, I just might say that the data that you personally created was of unbelievable help in setting the record straight about what really happened, not what people imagined happened. And that was so important. And you also created a lot of negative data, meaning we measured it and there's nothing there. And that negative data is unbelievably important. And as a health physicist, I never realized, 10 years later, 20 years later, how important negative data, meaning there's nothing there, is. And you created a lot of that. Now, the Environmental Protection Agency, under the leadership of Bill Kirk, established a monitoring program, and actually they actually had a site right there, right next to 3 Mile Island, where they ran the Radiological Environmental Monitoring Program. And after a number of years of 3 or 4 years of running this, they wanted to back off from this, but they still wanted to have a program, they in the state of Pennsylvania, they still wanted to have a program that gave an independent look, had nothing to do with the utility whatsoever, had nothing to do with the NRC, gave an independent look at what was going on, because the state owes they owe the public responsibility. They have the responsibility of monitoring radiation in the environment and saying it is in fact safe. And the only way you do that is to take measurements and run what we call a REMP, a Radiological Environmental Monitoring Program. Now, you were involved with this program after EPA had set it up under Bill Kirk. And can you tell me what happened there?
Yeah, the EPA ran that program for quite a few years. It might have been like 8 to 10 years. I don't remember exactly now, but certainly 8 years, and found that they couldn't come up with a good way of gracefully backing out of that. And it wasn't their function to provide that sort of monitoring program around operating nuclear power plants. So about 1988, I think it was, I submitted to them a proposal that would allow them to gracefully back out by transferring the whole monitoring program under contract to me at the Hershey Medical Center, and with the idea that they would fund it for an additional 2 years, and then it would be turned completely over to the Hershey Medical Center and the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection under their Bureau of Radiation Protection. And so I operated that monitoring program for an additional 2 years under contract with EPA, and then for 2 or 3 more years under Pennsylvania and the Department of Environmental Protection.
And so it's unique that a medical center is operating a radiological environmental monitoring program per se, but it must have been awfully good training for your students.
Oh, absolutely. It was, you know, we enjoyed doing it, and it was a good feeling to be able to, once again, continue interacting with the public, not to educate them about radiation per se, but to have the ability to put their minds at ease, because you could show them the data. Look, this is not different from background. There are no spikes, there are no positive readings, and this sort of thing. There is no radioactivity being put out in our environment, and here's the data and the measurements to prove that. So it was a good opportunity to continue interacting, providing reassurance with the public, and this is something that yeah, I got involved in 1979, and to this day I'm still involved in that sort of thing. You know, certainly was occupied a great deal of my time when Pennsylvania was in the process of looking for a low-level radioactive waste disposal site, and certainly occupies a fair amount of my time whenever there's something goes on, like even a traffic accident involving a package of radioactive materials for a nuclear medicine department somewhere, and so on. So it's been a good and unique experience, and I've had a lot of opportunities to give talks and to explain radiation to various public groups, particularly in my area with the Rotary and the Lions and various church civic groups and all this sort of thing. So it's something I love to do. Yeah.
Well, you're a natural teacher, obviously.
Yeah, I love to. A week ago, I did discussions on electricity and magnetism for all 4th grades at the Lower Dauphin School, which is in my area. So in one day, I got to teach electricity and magnetism to over 350 students. And what a wonderful time that was. And I do this on an annual basis. I go out all the time and give talks on radiation, radioactivity, radiation detection, and I go out and I give talks on oil painting techniques. I go out and give talks on the joys of reading and so on, because I've always been an avid reader, so and I really think that if you can turn kids on to reading, you're setting them up for a good future.
Very wise statement. Now, in 1986, you started as a freshman board member of the American Board of Health Physics. I believe it was 86.
I think we're referring here, Sid, to the board of directors of the Health Physics Society.
Of the Health Physics
yeah,
Society, yes.
Yeah, I was elected to the board of directors, and I did serve as a member of the board of directors. And shortly after that, I also joined the Rules Committee and ended up being parliamentarian, so I served again as parliamentarian under Ken Mossman's presidency.
And then I believe that you were a delegate to the International Radiation Protection Association from the Society.
I've been a delegate to IRPA on several occasions. And
then in, was it 1994 that you got your full professorship?
It was earlier than that. It was about 1990, 91, that time
91,
frame
okay, I'm sorry.
That I was promoted to full professor.
And then, oh, it was in 94 that you started your association with the journal.
That's correct. In 1994, I was appointed editor-in-chief of the Health Physics Journal.
Now, that has been an incredible amount of work. I know that. Now, can you tell me a little bit about the innovations and the things that you've done there?
Well, I took over a journal that was operating very well under the previous editorships of Jen Ressler and then Rich Vedder. And so I took over a journal that was operating very well. Yeah, but there were some things that I wanted to do with the journal. I took it over at a time when we sorely needed to start looking ahead to electronic publication, use of electronic media for submissions and transmissions of manuscripts and all this sort of thing. So I took over as editor with the intent of bringing it into the modern electronic era, and I think we've succeeded very well with that. At this point in time, over 95% of all the finalized manuscripts that are submitted on disk in digital format. I took a look at the journal and what people wanted that we, at that point in time, were not providing them. And I got a lot of calls and a lot of emails from people saying, does the journal have a search program? And no, we didn't. So one of the things that I did was to establish an online journal search program for all the members of the Health Physics Society and all the individual subscribers to the journal. So that's been up and running for the past 4 years. We have all the issues of the journal in it. It's a unique program. Not only does it give you the title and the authors, but it'll give you the abstracts. And for the past 5 years or so, if you want to scroll to the end of the article when you're through reading the abstract, you can find all the references cited in the article. So it's a very powerful program. It's very, very fast. It gives you multiple ways to search, either by author, by title, by keywords, by hints, what have you, and so it's working extremely well. The other goal that I had was to develop an electronic publication capability. At this stage of the game, we're still receiving all of our manuscripts in paper form. And then they're being duplicated. And then they're being sent out to the associate editors in paper form and sent out to the reviewers in paper form and this sort of thing. And so my vision was to create a system where everything could be done electronically. Submissions could be handled electronically. They could be sent out to the associate editors or reviewers and so on. They could be sent back electronically back to the... This does two things. One, it saves a lot of time. And the other thing is it saves a lot of money. We just had a hike in postal costs. So there's been a significant increase in the cost of mailing and this sort of thing. And it's not the mailing costs with 300, 400, 500 manuscripts a year. Those mailing costs are not insignificant.
Well, are you going to go to Word or something like that as a standard for the media? That in other words, you want everything in Word format, something like that. Is that what you're trying to get to?
Yeah, with the new program, as soon as we unveil it and make it available, submissions will be in Microsoft Word. Yep.
Wonderful. So, and it seems to me also that you started the Operational Radiation Safety Journal, too. Can you say a little bit about that?
Well, there was a need within the society to provide our membership with more articles operationally oriented. You know, these days we're taking on a new classification of membership. We're taking on more entry-level individuals into the society and so on who have a need for this sort of thing from a training standpoint, from a guidance standpoint, and so on. So there is both a perceived and a spoken need for more and more operational type information. And so to satisfy this needs at the request from the Society's Board of Directors in 1996, I think it was, 97, that time frame, I created a new publication called Operational Radiation Safety. And so we've been publishing issues that we're almost at a 3-year point now. It's so far been a tremendous success, both from the standpoint that we've been able to attract good quality articles dealing with operational topics for it, and from the standpoint that I received tremendous positive feedback from the readership as to how they like it, how useful it is for them, et cetera, et cetera. And so for me, that's the gratifying thing, that we've created something that satisfies a need, and people are finding great use for it.
Now, I noticed that in 1995 you were elected to the NCRP. Can you tell me a little bit about your work with them?
Well, I've been involved with the NCRP probably for 10 years prior to that, because I'd been on several committees developing reports. I'd chaired a couple committees that completed reports for the NCRP.
What were the topics?
The first one that I did turned out to be NCRP report number 105, which was radiation protection for medical and allied health personnel. I then chaired a committee that did report 124, which was an evaluation of occupational public exposure from nuclear medicine operations. And more recently, I helped to do rewrites of the 2 NCRP reports on operational radiation safety. One is programs and the other is training. So
you've been really busy, and then in 95 you were elected to the full committee.
That is correct. I was elected to the council in 95.
And so you're on the council now. Are you working on reports as we speak?
We are, yeah, I've been very active on Scientific Committee 46, which is the operational scientific committee. And we've been very active in writing reports and this sort of thing. We did the 2 operational training and programs reports, and we're also right now looking at the possibility of doing several others. One that I'm personally involved with at the moment is a rewrite of report number 36 on radiation protection in veterinary practice. So
you're incredibly busy from what I can see, and you love your teaching, obviously. I also noticed that you were at one time president of the Delaware Valley Society for Radiation Protection, and it seems to me that right after TMI, didn't you help to form a new chapter of the Health Physics Society?
Yeah, we certainly did. After the accident at TMI Unit 2, there were a lot of people brought in to handle the decontamination of that unit and the removal of the fuel from the reactor core and that sort of thing. And a lot of these were health physics types. And they were busy, putting in a lot of overtime, this sort of thing. So they really didn't have the time to participate in the activities of, say, the Delaware Valley chapter, which was a 2-hour drive away and so on. So we decided the best way to serve the needs of the people in our area would be to form a new chapter, and that we did. We created the Susquehanna Valley chapter that came into being in early 80s.
And that's still a very active chapter.
And it's still a very active chapter.
Now, throughout your career, which has been multifaceted, I think is a good way to describe it, you've seen health physics change greatly from almost a fledgling type of profession to a profession that involves many ologies, so to speak, many areas. And as is true with any rapidly changing profession, it's going to continue to change. So in the few minutes we have left here, Ken, could you kind of give me your thoughts on where you think our profession is going or where you'd like to see it go? I know this is a difficult question.
Well, there certainly has been changes, and I think the biggest change that I see is the de-emphasis on research, in particular health physics research, radiation biology research, and that sort of research. And we can see that reflected in a change in the types of manuscripts being sent to the Health Physics Journal for publication, that sort of thing. The number of pure research articles is decreasing. The number of articles that are moving into what is currently going on, such as decontamination and decommissioning, are on the increase. The number of articles dealing with evaluation of radioactivity in the environment or evaluation of radioactivity at long closed disposal sites and this sort of thing are on the increase. So that's where the emphasis is. That's where the money is going these days. And so we are constantly changing in terms of what's going on in the field. So we'll see a lot more of decontamination, decommissioning. On the research end of things, there's some wonderfully exciting things going on in terms of, gene sequencing and all this sort of thing, and the breakthroughs that they're starting to make now in identifying specific gene defects that lead to breast cancer and this sort of thing, and giving them just incredible methods to use in the future to either early detect or alter things before the cancer even develops.
That's one of the exciting things.
So there are just tremendously exciting things going on in research. And in medicine, it amazes me. I've been closely aligned with nuclear medicine for 30 years now. And it seems every time some new imaging modality comes out, they say, okay, that's the death of nuclear medicine. It happened when ultrasound was improved to the point where it was made diagnostically useful. It happened when CT scanning came on. It happened when MRI imaging came on, and this sort of thing. But nuclear medicine is still there and still going strong, and the reason for that being is that there are a lot of great minds working in the field of nuclear medicine, and there are new inventions, new innovations, new techniques, new procedures, and this sort of thing coming along all the time. I get amazed every time I get down to nuclear medicine, and I look now not at the few hundreds to few thousands of dots that created an image when I first started in this field, but now I see these wonderful reconstructions of organs and regions in 3 dimensions that rotate on computers and this sort of thing. And so what's being done in medicine today in combining all of these imaging modalities with computers and so on is making for just a very, very exciting aspect of this whole profession. I'm enjoying it more today than ever before, and I've always enjoyed it. But there are just wonderful and exciting things going on. We're getting involved as soon as I go back. This week I've got to get involved in training programs. We're starting intravascular brachytherapy programs to decrease the possibility of stent collapse and this sort of thing. And there's all sorts of wonderful, exciting things going on.
Well, I think one of the reasons that you find them wonderful and exciting is because of the fact that you can bring so much to bear because of your long history and all the incredibly hard work you've done. And I for one, just think that it's unbelievable the amount of teaching that you've done over the years and the amount of innovation that you've brought to our society. And so I want to thank you so much for giving the History Committee a chance to record all of these things. It's a shame that we can't go on for hours because there's so much we can talk about. But thank you so much for giving us your time.
Sid, as always, it's a pleasure. You're very welcome, and thank you.
Okay, good. Good. I think I